Good morning. I'm Sister Catherine Ferguson, and I'm here today to introduce you to the video that follows. It's a video primarily of the meeting that we had with the Spokane region of a class that three of us, myself, Mary Ellen Robinson, and Mimi Maloney took, called Earth Law for All, Laws and Legal Systems for the Whole Earth Community. We invited everybody to join us from the Spokane region because we felt like this course was so connected to the act of the last general chapter, the 2021 act of the chapter for integral ecology. And we wanted to share some of the insights that we had from this particular course with you because, again, we felt like it's a good way of going deeper into that particular act of the chapter and perhaps leading us to some new actions. So when we did the video, the last half was recorded actually at the meeting, but the first half for some reason was not. So we are doing a revision of that or a review of that so you have a feeling for the first part. In this link that you get for this video, you'll also have the handouts with some of the activities that we did as part of that meeting. So we would encourage you to follow along with that and follow along with us as we carry on this beginning revision, and hopefully we'll put it all together into one video and you can see it. So the first thing we started with was a song that we felt really expressed very well the kind of thing we were all about. It's called Ground of All Being with Jan Novatka, and on the handouts that I referred to, the lyrics for that are on there. So I would invite you to listen and to, if you wish, sing along, and trusting that you'll be able to hear just as well. So a little more detail about where we invited you and why we invited our mission center, our region, to be part of this. As I said, because we took this online course that gave us such new learnings and new ways of looking at some things that we thought was really important to share with you. The course, as I said, was called Earth Law for All, Laws and Legal Systems for the Whole Earth Community. And it really helped us to be more realistic about the meaning of some of the idealistic words in our last acts of the chapter. In that act, we were told or asked to adopt new worldviews, attitudes, and ways of being. We were told to deepen our consciousness and capacity to live oneness and interdependence with the whole Earth community. We were told to be a catalyst for building community and partnerships that embraced integral ecology as a way of life. We were told to call ourselves to a personal and communal transformation prophetic witness. And as you know, this goes right along the line of what Pope Francis was saying to us in Laudato Si, where he told us that we're not in an era of change, but we are in a change of era, and that we need to look at new ways that we can care for our common home to change the systems that are causing harm. Pope Leo also is going along with that same approach. He puts the love of God, love of neighbor, and love of all creation, resulting in caring for our common home, squarely in the middle of our Christian faith, saying that at the end of time, or when we face last judgment, if you will, God will ask us if we have cultivated and cared for the world that He created. If we've cultivated and cared for the world He's created, what will be our answer? So as I said, we wanted to share some things we learned about laws and legal systems for the whole earth that can lead us beyond things like simply not using bottled water or changing electric lights to LED lights. As significant as those might be for individuals, it's not enough. What we're going to be looking at is, first of all, old attitudes and what they are and why they need changing, and then take a look at some new attitudes that are developing and how we can be part of that movement. So just to remind us what our act of the chapter actually said, Mary Ellen Robinson is going to reread for you that act of the chapter, and then we'll continue on with the rest of the workshop. Thank you.
Acts of the Chapter 2021. We, Sisters of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary, believe that the call of our lives is rising from the voice of God and from the voice of the world today. The call is radical, compelling, and urgent. Our response must be daring. We hear the cries of a planet and of persons who cannot breathe. With hearts attuned to earth, our common home, and to the human longing for community, solidarity, and justice, we hear the cry of God's people, near and far, suffering isolation, exclusion, and racism in its diverse expressions worldwide. Conscious of these realities, in what ways will we seek forgiveness and reconciliation? What risks are we willing to take? Weighed down by economic inequality, people hunger for a just distribution of the goods of this world. This impels us to examine our security and abundance in light of this reality and of the call of Laudato Si. So we ask, how shall we act? Our SNJM charism, gift of the Spirit and legacy of Marie-Rose Durocher, impels us to act from our strength and vulnerability. At every stage of our life, rooted in prayer and believing in the power of presence, we commit ourselves to adopt new worldviews, attitudes, and ways of being through encounters with a diversity of peoples, cultures, faith traditions, and collaborators in mission. 2. Deepen our consciousness of and capacity to live our oneness and interdependence with the whole earth community. Be a catalyst in creating new forms of community and partnerships that embrace integral ecology as a way of life. Call ourselves to personal and communal transformation that impels us to collaborate with others in being a prophetic witness in religious life, in the church, and in our world today. As sisters and affiliates, in collaboration with our partners, we will walk together to bring these chapter acts to life.
Now we'll continue on now that we've heard the acts of the chapter and some of the new attitude that it's calling us to. And I'm going to invite you to turn to the third page of your handout, where there's a mini quiz for reflection, and invite you to take a few minutes to fill out that mini quiz, and you can pause the video for that time. And then I'm going to turn it over to Mimi, and she's going to make a few comments on that, and then share some thoughts with you about new attitudes that we need to adopt, become in contact with, learn about as we move forward in being faithful to this act of the chapter. Thank you so much.
Our 2021 chapter acts invite us to an urgent call at this time, namely to adopt new worldviews, attitudes, and ways of being. But how do we do this? What is our current worldview, and how can we evolve beyond it? As I have been thinking about this chapter act, it strikes me that the focus of so many of the current environmental, social, and economic injustice crises with which we are confronted are on the symptoms of these crises, like climate change, pollution, racism, and global inequality, to name just a few. But what is even more important and needed is to get at the unconscious and underlying assumptions that underpin our thinking and current worldview. So first, a few words about what is meant by this term worldview. Our worldview is basically the understanding we have of the world, our knowledge of how it came to be, how it is organized, how we humans fit into the greater scheme of things, and where it is all going. Our worldview comes to us from the origin stories, the creation stories we were told as children. And for us as Christians, our origin stories primarily come from the first book of the Bible, the Genesis account. And it would be difficult to overstate the impact this biblical worldview has had on each of us and our thinking, and on the thinking and institutions of Western civilization. I'd like to read a short passage about the creation of the world from the book of Genesis that we learned as children to demonstrate this. I quote, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and cattle, and over all the wild animals and the creatures that crawl on the ground.' God created man in his likeness. In the divine image he created him. God blessed him, saying, "Be fertile and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over all the living things that move on the earth. See, I give it all to you." God looked at everything he had made and found it to be very good. The biblical creation story that we learned is beautiful and has served us for a long time. But over the millennia, misinterpretations of this story have led to our current Western worldview, a worldview that is no longer adequate and is, in so many ways, leading to great suffering of peoples throughout the world, to the destruction of our life support systems, and to the degradation of our world. The questions Catherine gave you to fill out about the dominant Western biblical worldview highlights some of the main features of this worldview, such as that God created the world and found creation to be very good, that creation is static and fixed and was completed in 7 days and is now over, that humans were made in the image and likeness of God, that all other beings are material, not spiritual, only humans have souls, and that humans are to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. This was our old world view, and many in Western civilization still see the world in this way. The good news now is we have a new story of creation, the epic of evolution, a story that leads us to a new and different worldview. This story comes to us from the wisdom of our faith traditions, the wisdom of indigenous peoples, and from the stupendous scientific discoveries that have been made over the last several centuries. And what does this new story tell us? It tells us that we truly are all one, that the universe, earth, the whole created world are all part of a living, evolving, and emerging cosmos, that everything that exists is part of and participant in this interconnected and interdependent living system that has been evolving for 14.7 billion years from the Big Bang, that we live in a sacred universe, that the whole world is permeated and penetrated by spirit, and that the human species is one species among countless other species in this one sacred community of life. Humans are a part of nature, not its center. We must move from an anthropocentric, human-centered worldview where only humans are spiritual and have rights, to an ecocentric, an earth-centered, and biocentric, life-centered worldview in which all beings and natural systems have rights. This is the new worldview that our chapter acts urge us to adapt, because we now know things about our world that we have never known before, and that thus our worldview, attitudes, and ways of being must change before we destroy one another and this beautiful world that comes from the beautiful world in which all beings are embedded. I have spoken about our biblical worldview that comes from the biblical stories we were told, and I'd like to conclude these remarks with a quote from Pope Francis that sums it all up. It is from Laudato Si, and he is speaking about this, about the creation stories we were told. I quote, "This allows us to respond to the charge that Judeo-Christian thinking on the basis of the Genesis accounts, which grants man dominion over the earth, has encouraged the unbridled exploitation of nature. This is not a correct understanding of the Bible as understood by the church today." Thank you.
Some of you might be saying at this point, well, yes, I agree with everything that Mimi just told me. That isn't particularly new, but it's a foundation for new attitudes and new worldviews. So what we're going to shift to now is some of the material that we really learned in Earth Law. And I think, again, I just want to say the title, and I've got to get it right somewhere here.
Do you want me to read it?
Yep.
Earth Law, Emerging Ecocentric Law, a guide for practitioners. We all get to practice.
So I want you to look at on this handout sheet again where it says reflection questions, and just take a look at the 4 questions that are there. We're not going to do a whole lot with them, but I want you to think about, what does it mean to say we're called to live in interdependence with the whole Earth community? What is the state of God's ongoing creation of our whole Earth community, of our universe also, its land, its air, its water, its plants, its animals, which include humans? And the next question was something I hadn't really framed in this way until we took the Earth Law course. Is it possible we might come to a point where the Earth community as we know it cannot survive? We certainly have seen the destruction of many diverse species. We know that we've got plastics in our bodies and in a lot of the soil and all the things that were pure at one point. We certainly know that pollution that's in one place is in the whole atmosphere of the earth. We know that, I believe we all know that human activity has raised the temperature in the earth, causing more storms, causing droughts, causing different things with our food sources. So I'd really ask you to consider, is it possible, maybe not in our lifetimes, looking at all of us, but in the children and grandchildren's lifetimes, that we might come to a point where the Earth community is uninhabitable for many of its people. We already know that for people in the Pacific Islands, they're islands because of the rising water, because of the melting ice and the rising water. Many of them have lost their homelands and are migrating to Australia or New Zealand. So some of this has already come about. Is it going to be enough so that the whole Earth community essentially collapses? And then I think you could all name some human activities that degrade the Earth. Anyone, any ideas just off the top of your head? What degrades the Earth?
Strip mining, deforestation,
Plastics in their disposal, they don't dispose.
You gotta talk louder.
Plastics and how they biodegrade, they don't.
Mhm.
Right.
And the creation of those plastics, the chemicals it takes to, and it goes into our environment.
Right. And Francis, would you say what you said a little louder?
Deforestation is one.
Certainly mining.
Yes,
Do
mine
you
is
know-
name first.
Do you know any way that you could mine, extract something from the earth where it doesn't destroy part of the earth? I don't know one. So when they talk about earth-friendly mining, I'm thinking that's an oxymoron if I ever heard one.
Well,
Mountaintop removal in
Mountaintop.
mining.
Carbon emissions, as I was driving up here alone in a car.
But if you'd flown, it would be worse.
Yeah,
Yes,
a lot more, yeah.
But if we had, better more earth-friendly transportation system, it wouldn't be as bad.
Mhm.
So, and what about fossil fuel extraction?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but I've read many, many stories of areas where the land and the area is completely destroyed because of the way the oil
Strip
companies extract things. I think of Nigeria. I think of a case in, was it Ecuador? The last
I
one?
think it was Ecuador.
Ecuador, where the oil companies came in, extracted, left all the debris and oil spill stuff in the whole area, destroying the habitat for people. So I think we can all
Industrial farming.
industrial farming. And then the question becomes, well, what are some of the actions taking place now that are moving us into new worldviews and new attitudes? Well, we'll take more look at that in a minute. All right. As you look at those questions, is there any other comments that people might want to make about what comes into your mind when you look at those questions? Joan?
I just wanted to say, it's so contradictory. I totally believe in all the spirituality and all this, but in my daily habits,
Yes.
I still often, for example, even as we were talking, I was looking at, I brought my own water bottle so I wouldn't be using, but even around here we use plastic all over the place. We waste, and I do it in my personal life, but I thought the contradiction is my water bottle is plastic. Now I do have a metal one that I wash, and granted this lasts for a long time, but it's not biodegradable. So it's like I totally believe in all the theories, but in the practical living out of it, sometimes I don't have a choice when I live in a place like this.
Well,
But I
and
do
it
have
just,
choices in my personal life, and Mimi and I have talked about trying to make some headway here on recycling a little bit more, and but those are tiny little things. And then the other thing, and then I'll be quiet, is that on our country's level and globally, it's like some of the things that we worked and fought for are now being reversed.
Yes.
And that is so hard to witness. When major things and policies
Yep.
go back on everything you've worked for and prayed for and hoped for and dreamed of.
and some of that goes back to the worldview that Mimi was talking about a few minutes ago. The idea that man can dominate the earth, and really everything on the earth is completely for human use, no matter what.
Doesn't it boil down to money? If
Profit.
the reason people do those things is because they're gonna make me more money.
And
if
give
I
me more
produce
power.
things. Yeah, more power. But that's been going on. Is anybody watching the revolution?
Looking forward to it.
It's a kind of a itty bitty illustration of how human nature, they weren't together in any way whatsoever. They didn't know where they were going or what they were doing. Some of them had this idea, some of them had this idea, and they were trying to pull together so many different things and make sense of them. those individual people, even the ones that signed up to fight, you know, they had an idea, and some of the things that it showed in the program last night, the people, the most recent recruits, it was because they could get land in Indian country, people that never had anything before. It was a chance, you know. It was very natural. They were trying to get ahead. They were trying to do something that would make a difference in their own personal lives, their ability to live and survive. Now that's been going on since Genesis. I'm sure Adam and Eve, and what are those other fellas, you know, Cain and Abel, and wasn't that, we've been doing that, and so that has another, it's another thing to consider. Yes, the worldview is wonderful if we can help people establish that.
Yep.
But I don't know what you're going to do about human nature
Well,
and the damage it can do to everything.
but Adam and Eve had a biodegradable apple core.
We don't know what they did with it.
Did you want to say
Just,
something?
what was I going to say? Oh, I think in terms of worldview, the things I mentioned, another thing that's going to have to change is we're part of a living community. There are limits to what we can do. I think that what you were talking about, Marianne, about the profit motive, our worldview is kind of, you know, well, it is profit, having more things, having more money, having more land. And what's the quote from Pope Francis? We're living in a
change of era.
A change of
not,
era.
Not an era of change,
But a change of era. So I really think that it's kind of like an evolutionary leap in our consciousness that, you know, if our worldview could be more, you know, health and well-being for all and that, rather than just having a bunch of things. So I don't know. I think there are a lot of things that are part of our worldview that we have to question. That development and progress isn't just having more money and more things. We have to rethink that whole thing.
Just to add something here real quick. We're talking about the Western worldview, and specifically about the United States falling way behind and turning around. The rest of the world isn't. The rest of the world knows there's problems.
Yeah.
I mean, Kabul has 8 million people in it. They're running out of water and talking about evacuating 8 million people out of Kabul, Afghanistan. I mean, they know they're in real trouble. And I think China is way surpassing us on sustainable energy.
You're right.
And we've lost all of that.
Food.
Yeah,
They are at the point where they can feed their own people. We can't feed our own people.
so we're really this, you know, the United States has been so powerful over the whole
Yes,
world.
you're right.
And we've just slipped way back.
I agree, yeah.
And sometimes we used to have a conscience
Yes.
and a soul.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
at
we are
least
soulless.
they tried to convince us that we had a conscience, and now we're just not even playing that game. So as we just talked about, there's two attitudes I think that biblical-based attitudes that we want to move away from. One, in Scripture it talks about dominion and subduing the earth. So the real meaning of that is more being responsible for, not dominating. So if we flip that a little bit, we get a different picture. And I think another one that we need to do is to think of, we have this hierarchical idea about man being on top. God's above that, of course, but then man, and then everything else is under that. We need to change our attitude so we truly live out a creation-centered attitude where we're just one among many. And I know Mary Ellen's going to talk about that a little bit later, so I will carry on.
Actually, this just talks about that.
Yeah.
All right, at this stage, what I'd like to do is go through a couple of things that were new for me, that were, well, some were new, some were reaffirmed, in terms of our laws and our legal system. In the 1970s, when we began to develop environmental protection laws, those things were looked at by the rest of the world as a positive development to try and protect our environment. However, those things have been gutted much in the last, 70 to 20, 2 plus 3, about 50 years. So that at this point in time, our environmental laws essentially are laws that are designed to give corporations the right to pollute. How so? Well, one of the tools in an environmental protection system is when somebody has a big project, they need to submit an environmental impact statement. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but they're supposed to. But in that, a big part of the environmental the environmental impact statement is, well, if there are harms involved in this, how do we mitigate them? How do we keep them from happening? How do we make them less? So what are we doing? We're essentially saying, okay, it's all right for you to do this harm if you compensate financially, if you prove that there's nothing else that would be as beneficial as this, but oftentimes the benefits are potential. Example, you've probably heard about the data centers, the AI data centers that are being promoted at this time, which you may have heard require massive amounts of water to cool the systems, the computer systems or whatever it is that are doing that. And that might mean changing a river's flow, damming a river. It might mean destroying sacred grounds for Native peoples, because where they're going to put it is primarily in Black and brown communities. They're not going to the ritziest part of town to try to put the data centers in. And then using all the massive amounts of water that it requires. When we know that the amount of fresh water we have is a fixed amount. So where am I going with this? So when the people come to this, the kind of benefits that they say could happen from the AI center, well, if we use AI, well, it can talk to us about how to solve some of our environmental problems. Hypothetical. The folks that come in and say, well, what are the harms? Their harms are really just, they're ones that have been proven. They know those harms are going to be there. So oftentimes with the environmental impact statement, it's giving the advantages, so to speak, for each project that is in the hypothetical. Whereas oftentimes the harms are actually ones that we can prove have happened. So back to the legal systems. One of the ways that we hope in our legal systems that we could make a difference is to change our laws so that they use as a principle the precautionary principle. Okay, what does that mean? It means it's a framework for decision making that advocates taking preventive action in the face of potential harm, and it suggests that when an activity, it shifts the burden of proof from the people that are doing the project to and the people that are not in favor of it it shifts the burden of proof to prove that the people that are doing the projects have to prove it's safe rather than the way it is right now, which the people who are arguing against the project have to prove that it's harmful. So we're just kind of backwards in the way all of that goes.
New and I don't know how to do it. How do I do it? I'm sorry, this was new and I don't know how to use it.
And we all understand that, don't we?
I'm so sorry.
Well, we're happy you have a new phone.
I'm not. Thank you though. I'm so sorry.
Okay. All right, before we go on, I'd just like to invite us to stand for a minute or two. I'm feeling a little bit like it's getting warm and we haven't moved for a bit. And you probably know that I believe it was with Citizens United, corporations were given a legal standing in court. They have rights like people do. So one possibility is, why don't we give nature rights in court? Why can't the river have rights? Why can't animals have rights? Why can't mountains and forests have rights? And then we would appoint legal guardians who could speak for these beings in court. So that's kind of called the rights of nature movement. And there are folks in the legal system that are working to make that happen. And I'll give you examples a little bit later of places in the world where it actually already has happened and where it's managed to maintain the integrity of some natural thing in the world because of that. Another is the public trust doctrine, and it's a principle that holds that a state's government has the duty to hold certain natural resources like navigable waters, submerged lands, in trust for the public. This means the government has to manage these resources for public use, such as commerce, navigation, fishing, recreation, and cannot grant exclusive private ownership that would harm public access or public trust. And this really started during Roman law, but we've totally lost that in our legal system. Another one is the rights of future generations. And actually there was a group of young people in Oregon who, let's see, I want to make sure I get the right one here. It was called the Juliana case in the United States. And they brought a constitutional climate lawsuit, 21 young people from Oregon in 2015, which argued that the United States government's policies promoting fossil fuels, think disturbing the Arctic, doing fossil fuel in the Gulf of Mexico, not Gulf of America, which argued that the US government's policies promoting fossil fuels violated their fundamental rights to life, liberty, and property. They felt that because of what was going on, their future rights to live in the kind of world they wanted to live in with the environment the way it is now were being destroyed. So what happened? Well, in Oregon, that was upheld to a certain extent. Then it went to the next court up, and the next court up says, we can't judge that. There are no laws about that. So we just have to throw it out because there's no grounds on which you can argue this case. But if we had laws that supported the rights of future generations, then cases could be made to whenever felt there was a violation of that. And I don't know about you, but when I think about my grandnieces and grandnephews, I think, what kind of a world are they going to grow up in? With the world that I knew, the natural world that I knew, being destroyed systematically, really, for as Marianne said, economic profit and power of the current government.
Well, we need the young people to speak up and stand up.
They did
Yeah.
in Oregon, and they were told, you can't do this because we don't have laws about it. So, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary Ellen. She's going to talk about another area of law which really has kind of betrayed us in a sense, I think.
Catherine, if you had heard, I'll come up front, all the different examples that we learned, and then to keep into our minds the details of it. But there are places in the world where rivers and mountains and ecosystems are being given rights. So it creates a global precedent that it could happen in New Zealand, it could happen in and it can happen to the Elwha River, which runs in Oregon and California. And
No, it's in the Olympic Forest.
Oh, the Elwha is in the Olympic Forest, and the Klamath is in Oregon. And those are two examples where, through legal systems, indigenous people got dams taken down. Sorry. And the salmon are running again. And all the natural environment. Yeah. So it reminds me of when I learned that a dead whale is worth millions of dollars. A live one is given $0 value. That's the wackiness. And I guess that goes, when we learned the definition of private property that our law is currently, it was 1765. William Blackstone, the first Oxford professor of English law, defined private property this way: sole and despotic dominion which one man claims and exercises over the external things of this world in total exclusion of the right of any other individual in the universe. And then I think about our SNJM documents about inter collaboration, thinking of the whole, the sole and despotic dominion. But that has been the basis of our understanding of private property. When I reflected on it, I thought it might have been a step forward at the time that property could be protected by law from just the king or the strong man. Wait, this is mine, you can't just take it. And we have private property, us as individuals, right? And as sisters, we have private property. But as we move toward this evolution of rights that allows other earth beings to also have what they call in court standing, or rights that you can be considered a being in court, I thought it's always an uphill battle. And then I thought, wait, there's my old thinking, to think of it, uphill battle, back to the Revolutionary War, right? What if it really is instilled in our evolving humanity, if we can pay attention to it? This desire to take care, to make things better, to find the way. We know that humanity has evolved so far. Can we do this too? And I think it's about that, believing that the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. It may take a long time, but there's a invitation and energy, a movement in us that we can nourish. So I think, and we can be called to the peaceable kingdom. We can feed on this kind of image and this. And if we ourselves are moving and living from that world and influencing others from the triangular dominant model to truly a circular model, the peaceable kingdom. So I'll just go right into some animism.
No, I want to do one more thing first.
Deal. I think that's all I, yeah.
I want to just point out on the back of the last page of your handout, there is one other kind of legal thing that is of interest, I think. 2 states in the United States have in their state constitutions what they call green amendments. State of Pennsylvania says, the people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. They're the common property of all people, including generations yet to come. As a trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people. Well, what does that do? That gives folks that feel that there's a violation of that, it gives them a legal standing, or not a standing, it gives them a legal principle on which they can base an argument. So it allows something to go forward in court that then could be decided in favor of clean air, pure water, the environment, generations yet to come. Montana also has one, and this is the wording, it's a slightly different wording, but the idea is the same. Well, the thing that I found interesting when I looked this up, at the last legislature, there was a group that tried to bring this Green Amendment idea to our state, to Washington. It didn't go anywhere. They're bringing it back, but right now they're looking for a representative or a legislator who will sponsor it to bring it into the legislation for this year. Now, it strikes me that if we have any connection to anybody in our legislature that we feel might be sympathetic, we could write that person and ask them, would you sponsor this? Would you bring it in there? Because I personally believe that this would give some ground for protecting the environment in a different way than we can do right now. So, yes.
Do you have the name or a description of that, so when we write, we can say, this is what it is we're talking about? It's there.
It's on your handout on the last page.
Excellent, okay.
Okay. Because I'm thinking that there's a couple of legislators from Spokane that I think are not, might be sympathetic. I'm thinking Roselli, but I don't know for sure. I'd have to do a little bit more research on that. And now, one of the other things that happened on this, and we'll go back to Mary Ellen, one of the people said, unless we become really close to nature, we cannot really begin to live these kinds of new attitudes. So a part of our coursework was a process called animism, and she's going to talk to you about that.
Thanks, Catherine. And I'm going to try and do it so I can hand it back to you for some more. So,
I don't have to.
okay, a part of the course, I'm going to, that the psychology of care for the earth and a psychology of being able to identify ourselves as part of this requires practice. And the founder said, I'm a lawyer, I practice law. We're a religious people, we practice our faith, right? And so we're invited into some practices that help us connect with nature and love all of creation and recognize our place as part of it. So I want to talk briefly about maybe the first 6 practices that we were invited to. And the first one is just to find what they call a sit space, which for a child could be down a slippery slope and sitting there by the river day after day. For me, it's on my porch, looking out at, really, I'm lucky to live in a neighborhood with lots of trees and bushes. I have planted some of them. A place where you can sit for a good 15 or 20 minutes. And instead of shutting down, going inside, you open up. Open all your senses. Pay attention to everything. What do you see? What do you hear? Just opening to all that life around you and let it come into you. And I've found when I've done this, it's addictive because it does pour life into you. Into me, it has. There's a lot more going on out there than I realized when I wasn't paying attention. then to really pay attention to one sense at a time and just spend the whole 15 minutes with what you're hearing or what you're smelling. Another time. Another, these are weeks at a time, getting that practice, getting that it's familiar. Befriend a tree. I haven't done this one yet, so it's kind of overwhelming me. Find 7 connections that between that tree, like with the soil, with the worms, with the air. I know I do love to watch the trees, the deciduous trees, how each leaf is responding to the breeze. Each leaf is dancing. Clearly, all of them part of that one tree. For me, it's such an example of the Holy Spirit at work in us too. But this, finding 7 connections, and then finding 7 connections to each of those, so you've got 49 connections. And I see Joan smiling, and I think that Sufi encourages these kinds of awarenesses. Am I right?
I love what you're saying.
So I have the connections online, actually. If any of you find that you would like to hear the teacher guide you through some of these practices, I can make them available to you. One is the breath to surrender, and I think we can do that one right here. And instead of trying to activate all our thinking, it's to deactivate so that we're able to be accessible to the languages of the world around us. So it's taking a deep breath and holding it and letting all your thoughts, feelings, concerns fill you up. And let them get bigger. Your worries, your feelings, your thoughts, just bigger and bigger and bigger, and then blow them out. Let them go. And we're encouraged to do it lying down, but you can also do it in your sit space. Do it as you prepare for an encounter with another being. Then, doing that, we're encouraged to make ourselves available to relate with a plant. To empty ourselves of our thoughts and feelings. How many of you talk to your plants? And do you feel like, have any of you felt like a tree talked to you? Or your plant did? Yeah. It'll just happen. I remember shoveling the snow, and there was no snow around this particular tree, and I said, "Did you do that?" And the tree said, "I do far more for you than you will ever know." Said it as clear as that. But they do. But also, we have more. We evolved with all the rest of creation. We have capacity within us to pick up their ways of communicating. We know pheromones and underground networks and electric impulses and odors that we're not conscious of because we haven't learned to pay attention to them. So doing that, release, and then listening. And we can come with a question. I've been trying with my plants, do you like where I put you? What do you need from me? How can I help you? And listen for the answer. And just being sensitive to images, to thoughts, to feelings. She talks about learning to recognize our radar that we have and gives some exercises for that. And then she led us even to communicating with minerals. And so those lessons are available. I think I can send them to you. One that was very powerful, just the first one, just finding that sit space, opening myself to what's around me. I It's hard for me to start my day now without doing that. But another one was putting my hand on my heart and thinking about my mother and being grateful for your mother. However she was, whoever she was, the gratitude for all that you have received from your mother and from her mother and from her mother. Are you doing it? And from her mother, and are you already back to somebody you have no idea who that woman was? And her mother. And her mother, and her mother, and her mother. Until now, because we know that we've evolved, we come to a time when that mother would have been not quite human. And her mother, and her mother, and her mother, and her mother. Until we're back to the first mammals. And her mother, and her mother, and her mother. And you see how it takes us back to the Big Bang. We are all connected. We all did come from the same source. So to just take time to do those kinds of exercises of gratitude. What Joan said struck me very much. We were taught, to be anti-animism because it's somehow like nature worshiping. It's nature joining, being one with, learning to live our oneness. Actually, unless there are any questions or comments, I think
We can just
those
close,
are the key.
close with the song.
Anybody have any
That's great.
bursting more? You're welcome.
We just want to say thank you all for coming, and we hope that this was somewhat interesting to you and perhaps gave you some new insights, new learnings.
And I do want to say it's so affirming for me that we as people who practice our religion and can practice this oneing, and Richard Rohr has been inviting us and finding those other invitations. We are joining that evolutionary process to the transformation that has to happen. So there is a place for us.
So I would invite us to take our handout, and the first page is the song that we've been listening to, and invite you to sing along with the song or not as you wish, but we'll just listen to it as a way to end our time together in terms of being more in tune with being part of creation and not above creation